Are you ready for the truth? Good, me too. Let's do this. Hi everyone, good morning and Happy New Year everybody. I hope your year has started really positively with good vibes. And I hope that this year will be very prosperous for all of us and joyous, although there's a lot of tribulations and turbulences going on in the world. Sometimes that is completely separate from our personal healing process, right? If you know what I mean. So, welcome to the Thermometer of Truth with another video. This is the third video under this YouTube channel of mine. It's been a while since I was planning to talk about this topic. Today I would like to talk about narcissistic societies and how culture enables narcissistic traits, how culture promotes and justifies whatever produces narcissism in our societies. Why is it important that we talk about this? How can we escape this kind of traits, this toxicity among our societies that is promoted by culture in order to live a healthy life for ourselves, but also to know that we are promoting the right things, right? I've been thinking about this topic for a while, and the reason that I decided to talk about this specific issue among our societies is not only because narcissism has become so common and it's growing, and at least that's what the thesis is, or that's what the specialists are claiming. There is a ongoing debate about the level of narcissism among our societies. However, it's important to note, according to myself, that not everything that is toxic is narcissistic per se, right? And not every society is narcissistic. That is why I'm going to focus only on two types of societies in this video, because otherwise it's way too much and the topic becomes too broad. But before I get into the topic and the reasons why I decided to speak about this topic, some disclaimers about the YouTube channel as always. For those of you who haven't followed my videos, the Thermometer of Truth is a channel dedicated to exposing the conceited societies. It's a channel dedicated to exposing truths that within our societies, modern societies, we have difficulty expressing and accepting, because a lot of people in most of our societies, most of the people, they like to hide the truth. The purpose of this channel is to expose the truth, because the purpose here is to understand and become aware and acknowledge the fact that unless we start building upon truth, unless we start building upon clean, honest intention, unless we start building upon values and virtues and what's important for us, we will never build any of the things that we claim we want. No peace, no prosperity, no joy, no abundance, no whatever your dream is, because we keep producing toxicity, which is also the topic of today. So a society that keeps producing and promoting toxicity, it is not possible to build anything clean and honest, is it? You cannot build integrity out of manipulation. You cannot build truth out of lies. You cannot build prosperity as a culture or society or a nation or whatever you are, individual, true prosperity, based on mind games, based on foolery and fakery. Who are you fooling is the question here. Who are you fooling? Who are you trying to fool? Because in this game we are fooling each other. We are not fooling anybody else. So the Thermometer of Truth is a mirror that is placed in front of us, including myself here, because the triggers to speak about the topics that I speak also come from my own life, from my own lessons and my own journey in life, which means I'm not perfect. I have made a lot of mistakes too. So I am not only sharing here my experiences, but I'm trying to bring awareness about the level, the depth of foolishness among our societies that we need to start cleansing in order to rebuild the systems. That being said, I have a lot of notes, so I'm going to read from time to time. Also, because of the time, everything that I have to say is important, so I might be reading in order to keep the structure ongoing, because I tend to get lost in the topic with my own opinion. But the purpose here to bring clarity about how narcissism happens in our societies, and the triggers for this topic were two. First of all, the first trigger came to me because of a conversation I had about a year ago with a friend who is born and raised here where I live now, that is in Western Europe. And we got into a conversation about cultures. I come from a different culture, she comes from a different culture. And we got into a conversation where she was telling me how much she admired the culture I came from because of the values that we promoted in that culture, right? Now, mind you, the culture I come from is a collectivist culture, and the culture she comes from is an individualistic culture, totally different. I will speak in details about that later. But her claim was that the collectivist cultures where I come from are much better because they stand for values, they stand for unity, they stand for family values, they stand for the interest and the good intention within the community. And her entire world shattered, basically, and her illusion broke completely when I told her that that was a facade. In some cultures, that sense of unity and community and true care that people project onto other people, that give this image to individualistic cultures, that these collectivist cultures are all about care and love and true bonding, right, connection. It's in fact a facade. In some cultures where, so basically I had to explain to her why I was thinking the way I was thinking. In some cultures where the law does not function, in cultures where the corruption is at the peak, very high, where the human rights are not represented accordingly, and where the citizen or the individual, for that matter, is left at the mercy of their own fate, people are forced to seek one another. It's not a choice. People are forced to live in a community close to one another. That is why they live next to each other. They gather together all the time, brothers, sisters, nieces, nephews, they're together all the time. But is it out of need, or is it a choice out of love? That was the whole discussion. And so that conversation right there triggered me to dig deeper, to understand if the culture I came from was the only one who was as deceitful as I thought, to portray something for something that it was not, right? To portray this image of united and caring and community, society or culture, but in fact there were hidden agendas behind, right? And it got me to dig a little bit deeper into the individualistic cultures too. And the second reason that I decided to make this video is because when I started digging deeper into the culture where I live now as well, right, that is individualistic cultures, I understood that they produce the exact amount of toxicity, if not more, but in a different way. The triggers were different, basically the game was played differently, right? But in these societies we also produce toxicity, right? Now, a side note here, not every culture that produces toxicity produces narcissism. right? Or is a reason to have narcissistic traits. Not every culture has narcissistic traits. Not every culture produces only toxicity. Every culture has good and bad characteristics, right? But my point in this video is to understand and to analyze the fact that when a culture, which is most of the cultures have toxic traits, the cultures produce toxicity. When we notice this kind of traits in a culture, it is our job to understand what hides behind that, what is promoted here, why is it promoted, and how can we remove it and replace it with something healthy, with healthy habits, with healthy behaviors and mindsets, right? So the other thing which was very interesting for me personally, which also explains my journey in these two different cultures, right? Because I was born and raised in a collectivist culture and I'm living in an individualistic culture. Sometimes it takes you to switch from one culture to the next one to understand how toxic they are. It took me to switch from collectivist culture where I came from, basically leave my country many years ago, to live in an individualistic culture, to adjust to capitalism, to adjust to all of these ideas of individualistic and individualism as an entire mindset shift. It took me to start my life from scratch, from zero basically, because that means you have to unroot and rebuild and reshape your entire identity around that new culture, right? To understand how toxic the culture that I left was. And that is what I want to talk about today. So let's start with some interesting notes here. Basically, the topic is, I think I announced it, is narcissistic societies, how culture enables, promotes, and produces narcissism. Let me have some coffee, because I enjoy my coffee when I talk to you, even though I don't see anybody. I often feel that I'm talking to myself. It doesn't matter, that's not the point. As long as the message has been right, is being transmitted. But I enjoy my coffee somehow while I speak, for some interesting reasons. I don't know why. By the way, it's a sunny day here where I live, so I'm looking outside the window. I'm not distracted. I'm just looking outside because it's nice weather. Okay, let's get deeper into this. Let's start with some basics here. What is culture and why is it important? Yeah. Culture is a shared system of beliefs, values, customs, and behaviors, sometimes silent rules as well, and regulations that shapes our way of thinking, acting, and behaving about the world around us, but also about ourselves, right? Sometimes we understand ourselves too by the way we perceive our culture. Sometimes we identify with our culture. And the reason that our culture is important is because all of these things, they shape us. All of these things have an impact on who we become as an adult. We grow up with certain expressions in the family that we think are inherited from the family lineage, but actually they are cultural issues. The way we behave in our families, the way we marry each other, the way we build relationships, the way we perceive love. It's all built on a certain amount, because culture is not the only factor that shapes and builds us, right? We are a product and a byproduct of many other things, not only culture. But in this particular topic, we need to focus on the culture and how culture does affect us. That means culture affects our choices in life too. You would be surprised to hear that the culture I come from originally, when I had to choose a study direction, I did not choose for the one that I loved to study. I had to choose for the profession that was paid the most back then, which was law. Lawyers were the most preferred. So the legal profession was the most preferred profession back then. Doctors, economics, engineers. So basically it was a cultural issue because everybody wanted to study the same thing. Why? Because that was the perception in the culture. You had to study something that brings you income, not something that you are called to study, not something where your heart lies, and not something where your passions and your strongest, basically, characteristics or sides of your character and personality lies, right? That is why if you go back into my culture, you'll see that you have thousands of lawyers, but very few legal professionals. Because we keep producing numbers. That's the problem. A culture that keeps producing numbers. So, why is culture important then? Because depending on what culture promotes or accepts or produces, it can add value to our lives and our societies, or it can damage us by promoting something that is toxic, by promoting something that is not healthy to our lives and to our future and the way we build societies or the way we build our families, first of all. It could be damaging. And so, because the culture influences all of our life, the direction we go through, how we take decisions, how we promote ourselves, what we want, even our expectations in life are affected by the cultural indicators, right? So the question is here, if the culture shapes us way more than we think it does, then what happens when the culture is promoting the wrong things? Because when a culture promotes the right values and virtues and rules and principles and customs, whatever we call it, then we are all good. Then that's perfect. But as we can see, culture does not always produce good things. It produces toxicity too. It produces manipulation. It produces pain. It produces shame. It produces hurt. It produces violence. It produces hate speech. It produces exclusion. It produces many toxic things. But what happens when that culture produces or actually supports all of this toxicity? That is when this culture becomes an enabler. When a culture supports all of this toxicity, it becomes an enabler of a bigger problem, of something bigger, right? Because mind you, the culture is not the only one who is negatively affecting our societies. There are many other factors too, but if the culture can support and produce so many negativity and toxicity in our societies, then you can imagine the other factors adding to that. You can imagine why the world is in the mess that it is, right? So what happens when a culture becomes an enabler of toxicity? We produce narcissism. That's what's produced. All of these bad habits, toxicity, whatever a culture supports and accepts as good things, instead of fighting them, yeah, then you produce narcissism. You produce narcissistic traits, right? So when a culture enables something, being that good or bad, it becomes an enabler of something, of a value, of a behavior, of an idea, or whatever it stands behind it. The danger with that is that such cultures will make it seem normal in order to be acceptable. In order to be acceptable as normal, a culture has to wrap it in a beautiful package and sell it to you as normality. Yeah. And that product is sold to you as normality in the name of the culture. That is where expressions such as, well, that's how we always did it in the family. That's how your grandmother did it. That's how your mother did it. That's how you're going to do it. Even though that's total toxicity, even though that's total pain in the family, that's get dragged from one generation to the next generation. But it was accepted in the family because that's how we do it. Right? in my culture, an example from my own life to make the point clear. When I decided to marry someone outside of my culture, everybody was in shock, because this was 20 years ago, right? A long time ago. That probably is much better now, but this is from many years ago. Everybody was in shock. How dare you go out of the line? I remember someone from my family telling me, why, you think we don't have enough men in here, so now you went and married somebody from another culture? For some people, it is not perceived and well received, the fact that you can break out of this cultural trait toxicity, right? Because sometimes you end up being happier with someone from another culture than with someone from your own culture, right? So those indications of how people react when you try to get out of the cultural chains and traps that are actually toxic tell you how brainwashed and how limited and how small we have become in our identity just to fit the cultural bias, just to fit the cultural boxes, right? So the other risk with this enabling of narcissism through culture is that the toxicity and everything that's promoted in that culture, it is excused in the name or under the blanket of the culture. Yeah, we are proud people. We don't do that. We don't behave like that other culture. That other culture, they're selfish. We are different. That's how cultural models sell themselves. While they're toxic, they sell themselves to be healthy, right? That's just an example. So what happens here is the gender roles, the family rules, the customs, the traditions, even though they are toxic, yeah, they are justified in the name of the culture. They are justified in the name of the culture, that same culture that shapes you to be a toxic person, right? So, for example, abuse in the family. In many cultures, women are abused and forced to stay within the relationship or the marriage for the sake of the children. In other cultures, women play the role of a hero, and they are seen as a hero because they make sacrifices for the children. They tolerate the abuse from the husband to save them, to save the family in the name of the marriage, or to not shame the family, because it's a shame to divorce. Even though your husband is violating you, it's a shame to divorce. It's a disgrace to the family. And so you are going to stay in toxicity and in shame and in violence, in silence, and suffer in silence, so that you can fit the cultural expectations instead of choosing for your own truth and freedom, right? So the mistreatment and disrespect have to be accepted as normal. It's not a choice. You don't get to choose. The culture decides for you, because the culture enables the abuser to hide behind the culture. That's the problem of narcissistic societies. So the other element of an enabler, the culture as an enabler to toxicity here, or narcissism, is that emotions, expectations, feelings are twisted, and they are often manipulated to produce a different goal or task than the original purpose. So basically we change the name. Yeah? In enabling cultures, we change the name of the things. We call things normal, even though it's toxicity and it's whatever it produces there. We camouflage it under a new name to make it more acceptable. So, for example, we call it customary law. Yeah, well, that's the custom. That's the tradition here. We call it tradition. Yeah, we call it tradition. We don't call it abuse. We call it tradition. So what happens is that the true love and the respect and the empathy are here withheld on purpose. Yeah, they are manipulated and withheld on purpose. So let's go a little bit into more specific details here, because as I said in the beginning, I'm going to stop only to analyze two cultures. That is the collectivist cultures, because that's the cultures that I know, right? There are many types of cultures. There's the collectivist culture, there's individualistic culture, where we live in the Western Europe here, mostly US, UK, Canada. Those are the countries that are mostly individualistic in the culture and the way they promote individualism. But there are also other cultures which are religious cultures. I'm not going to get into the religious cultures. That's a big group, and that needs a whole separate video, because they have very specific characteristics as to how they promote and enable narcissism. But I will stop into analyzing a bit the collectivist cultures and the individualistic cultures, because as I said, those are the cultures I've lived in. I was born and grew in a collectivist culture, and I'm living in a individualistic culture. So I know them both. Let me get some coffee, because I need some motivation. Let's see, what are these two cultures? The reason that I stopped into these two separate cultures, and very different, but which both produce toxicity and narcissism, is to make an important point, which is they both can produce toxicity. Now, in how far they produce narcissism, in how far they promote and enable narcissism, that's not a topic. We can get into a debate with professionals there, because I'm not a professional, and everything that I share in my videos is from my own life and from my personal knowledge. Yeah, I don't have a PhD on this topic, but so you can debate with me, of course, you are welcome. I hope I see some comments as well on my videos. But the point here is to understand that they both produce toxicity and narcissism. They are both enabling cultures to what's toxic and bad among our societies. And the only difference is the game is played differently. So both cultures, they enable narcissism, but the tools that they use to do it are different. The game is the same, but it is played in different ways. That's the secret. So if I would wrap it up into one sentence, I would say one produces the vulnerable form of narcissism, and the other one produces the grandiose form of narcissism, right? Those are the two main forms of narcissism. So in the collectivist cultures, it is more subtle, it is more hidden, it is more camouflaged, it is more conceited. It's called the vulnerable narcissist. Yeah, that's how they produce it. And in the individualistic cultures, we are proud of it. We don't hide it. In the individualistic cultures, we produce the grandiose narcissism, the people with the God complex. We are proud of it. Not only we are proud of it, we encourage it, right? So this is the main difference that we need to remember when it comes to these two cultures as to how they produce narcissism. So the goal of such cultures in what they produce is the same, but the mechanisms and the ways that they produce what they produce are different. So let's get a little bit into the main characteristic to understand what is a collectivist culture and what is an individualistic culture. Yeah, just a few points that I've noted here for you to understand what I'm talking about and how do we distinguish one culture from the other culture, right? What are the main characteristics? These are not all of the characteristics, but these are the main, according to me again, characteristics that differ into these two cultures. Let's start with the collectivist culture. So I will read one of the collectivist culture and then I'll jump into the individualistic and I'll switch on and on, right? So in the collectivist culture, The needs of the group, that is the needs of the family, the community, the nation, yeah, the needs of the group are above the individual desires, not above the individual needs, above the individual desires. At least that is what we claim, right? This is what we claim that these societies are. But I will go later deeper into how are these elements twisted, yeah, twisted by changing the meaning, by changing the name of what they are, by changing the purpose of what they were originally supposed to be, to become narcissistic traits. That's the problem with these cultures. Because basically, neither of them is bad. They both promote good things. But what happens in individualistic cultures? In individualistic cultures, the individual needs are prioritized over the needs of the group. So it's totally the opposite. People are mainly responsible for themselves in this culture, not others. Second characteristic. In the collectivist culture, they foster unity, loyalty, collaboration, obedience, respect, and support for others. That's what they promote there. In the individualistic cultures, they celebrate independence, autonomy, personal development, and empowerment and personal goals. In collectivist cultures, they prefer conformity and they resist change by suppressing the individual to fit in rather than to stand out. Oh, there are some birds on my balcony. Huh. Anyway, in the individualistic cultures, they support personal goals and achievements, competition, leadership, high performance, and they highly reward the result of the individual, not of the collective, of the individual. A last characteristic of the collectivist cultures is they claim that the individual in this culture is a continuation and a product of the family and the society. So the children, for example, they are seen as an extension of the family rather than as a separate, rather than a separate individual, independent person. In the individualistic culture, the individual is an end to itself. That's the goal. Me, me, me. Yeah. Personal identity and freedom are very important. And the basic rule is the I is more important than the we. That's the rule. So you can see these two cultures, at their core, they have nothing wrong. All of these elements put together or seen separately, they produce each other. Because even when you care about yourself, if you are going to prosper as a person, you are also going to affect and produce and promote and give to the society as a whole, right? And even if we turn it the other way around, if you care about community and unity and society and family, it will also benefit you as a person and as an individual. So they both go on and off, switching from one and swinging from the one side to the next side. And at their core, they both add value to our lives. There's nothing wrong with these cultures, according to this description. The problem is that these characteristics are not used for the purpose that they are created. That is the problem. In an enabling culture, all of these characteristics, they start to lose their original purpose. They start to be twisted and manipulated into its purpose and the meaning that they have, right? Because, for example, there is nothing wrong to say that a child is a continuation of the family lineage, because that's the truth, right? That's the truth. We are a product of our families too and our societies. But when you start treating the child as a personal property and not as a separate individual with dreams and goals, who needs support, who needs love in the family, when you start treating it as an object without any empathy, that's when you have enabled narcissism in the family. That's when we say that parent is a narcissist or on the verge of narcissism, for example, right? So this is a general, just to paint the picture about these societies, but I would like to go deeper here into some of the most interesting characteristics of these societies, of these cultures and how they function, but to show how they twist the meaning of the things. To show how that unity and community feeling that my friend thought was very good about the society I came from is twisted to be used and abused for self-gain and interest and manipulation and maintaining control within family, within a job place, within the society and so on. That's the purpose here. And that's what I want to do. But I don't know if I'm going to have enough time for all of these, but I will read them so I go faster. Let's start with the collectivist cultures. These are points that I have extracted from my own life. These are not something I've found on the internet, right? Because here's the thing, when you live in an individualistic society, they can never tell you what really a collectivist society feels like, or the culture, unless you have lived it yourself, right? And the other way around, I can never convince someone from an individualistic culture about the habits and the traits that we have in a collectivist culture. They'll never understand unless you have lived them yourself. You'll never be able to put them in the way that people truly grasp the meaning behind what you're talking about, right? Let's start with the collectivist societies. The first feature that is here twisted and used to change the game, right, that produces narcissism, because they become enabling cultures, they become enabling traits, is the proximity is a facade. Proximity is a facade. What does that mean? In collectivist societies, an important ingredient to the culture is proximity to others. The bond that we share with a family, with family members, with a community in general, right? But that is not always a choice. As I said in the beginning, sometimes is a tool for survival, but sometimes is a manipulation tactic. Sometimes is a tool for survival. When I said when the law does not function, you're going to have to rely to your cousin. You're going to have to rely to call a best friend to go to the hospital, whatever, right? So it's not always a necessity. It's not always a tool for survival. Sometimes it's a manipulation technique, because the same people that claim to be close to you, yeah, they will gain proximity onto false pretenses or pretending or whatever, smiling in your face, to get involved in your family, to get involved into your marriage, to get involved into your choices about life or whatever. And sometimes that ends up really bad. I have experienced this firsthand in my own family. Sometimes that has traumatic and dramatic ending for people. They end up destroying their marriages and their entire families because of this fake proximity that the rest of the family had in their business. Yeah. That is why in the individualistic cultures, people are very secluded and alone, because they realize that proximity is fake, is facade. Second element, the false sense of solidarity, because in principle and at the core, the solidarity is a beautiful virtue. But why are you being solidar with someone? That is the core questions. Why are you doing it? If you have solidarity with someone, with a cause, with a vision or whatever, with a political party or whatever, and if you're doing it from your hidden agendas and manipulation tactics, then that never ends up well, right? It ends up into totally something different than what it was supposed to be. But when solidarity is used for the right purposes and with a good intent, with the intent to build something pure, to build something upon truth and not lies, then solidarity is a beautiful virtue. But you see, in these cultures, sometimes Solidarity is false because people become solidaire with your pain, they become solidaire with your vision, they become solidaire with your organization, whatever you're doing, for self-gain. Not because they believe in your vision, not because they can see your vision, not because they support your vision, because they are there to self-gain. And that throws the entire purpose of solidarity in the trash. Basically, yeah. Third element, hierarchy is very strong. The ranking. In cultures where hierarchy is very important, questioning an elderly, saying no to a parent, disagreeing with a teacher, or challenging your boss is seen as disrespectful. That is seen as rebellion, which is totally different in the individualistic cultures. It took me many years to adjust to the idea here in the Netherlands that I could disagree with my boss. That I would sit in a meeting and I would be shocked to see how my colleagues would have no problem to challenge their boss. And to put him in his place too. And they would walk out of the room like nothing happened. I was shocked to see that, because the culture I came from, there was no way you could challenge the boss. The word of the boss was law, whether you liked it or not, because the hierarchy is what decides in these cultures. In a collectivist culture, it's the hierarchy that decides. I grew up without even daring to say no to my parents. My father would only take a look at me, only by looking at me, and I already knew that was an order to either shut up, to stop doing something. Right. The hierarchy here is very strong. Even though the hierarchy is not always right, even though that elderly person in the family can also make mistakes, right? Even though your parents are not perfect either. Disobedience is seen as disrespect. That's the rule here. The next rule, which is connected to what I said now, is silence is equal to obedience. Agreement with something in these cultures and silence is equal to obedience. If you don't speak and express your opinions and emotions, it means you are doing it to maintain the peace. But whose peace? Because sometimes, even in the family, the same people who want you to maintain the peace, to not speak truth and to be silent about something, are the same people who are manipulating you. Are the same people who are abusing you, and the marriage is one of the best examples in such cultures. The same husband who abuses you and who bruises you from the violence will tell you that he loves you. Therefore, you need to accept the abuse, because behind the abuse there's love. A jealous partner who makes scenes in the middle of the street and you can't even wear anything, that's slightly revealing as a woman because he's jealous, will tell you that he's jealous because he loves you. Behind the jealousy there's care. I care about you. That's why I'm jealous. I won't get deeper into this, because this is one of the things that makes me really pissed, about the whole charade and the whole falsity in the way humans interact and connect in a relationship. This is disgraceful to me. But anyway, I don't want to derail and distract myself. Next one. Control disguised as protection. This is exactly what I said now. I'm getting ahead of myself, I guess. So, control disguised as protection. What does it mean? Resistant to the tradition, societal rules are seen as rebellion or betrayal. Control is disguised as protection. You must fit the cultural expectations even when it asks from you to go against everything you stand for, or everything you know, or everything you are, right? One of the examples is the family dynamics. I believe the best example here is the relationship between children and parents. The level of manipulation, not only in collectivist cultures, also in religious cultures, the level of manipulation that happens in the family by mothers, by fathers towards their children, but also to one another. Partners manipulate one another by using the child as a bait, which is disgusting. I have seen families when I was growing up using their children as an emotional punch bag because their parents could not communicate, because their parents did not know how to sit down and talk to one another to solve the problems. So the child became the mediator to solve the parents' issues. I have no words for that. I'm not going to comment on that. You can make your own conclusions. How disgusting that is. Children grow up with a resentment, with a level of shame and blame that you wouldn't believe against their parents, but also against themselves, that they weren't able to fix the marriage of their parents. I have known women in my life as I was growing up, even in my family, but also especially in the culture I was raised in, which was typical. They would blame their children for the rest of their lives because the children interrupted their plans. My dream was to become an engineer. How dare you come in my life? How dare you make me pregnant? Wow, the level of victimization, unbelievable. And they would blame the child for the rest of their lives. I remember having a conversation like that with a woman, a very respected doctor. She was a good friend with my mother because they shared the same profession. And I remember her crying. I was a teenager and she was probably 50 years old back then. She sat on the table crying about how much her mother resented her because she came unannounced in her mother's life, and her mother's life became miserable because she wasn't able to raise a child. She wasn't ready to have a child. Wow. Now these are the cultural toxic enablers that make our societies a total mess. Because the problem here is we go out there in the world and we expect responsibility from grown-ups. The problem is these grown-ups were molded and shaped with toxicity and trauma and manipulation and pain from the moment they were conceived. From the moment they were born, these children carried an unimaginable amount of pain from the way that they were treated in the family. How do you expect that kind of person to become a responsible citizen? How do you expect from that person who is unhealed and filled with trauma and he's broken before he could even blossom to become an adult? How do you expect that adult to be, I don't know, a great father, a great boss, or a great politician? Where do people get this kind of theories? It's beyond my logic. So, reputation and image are everything. Oh yes, I have lived this myself. People in such cultures, they hide behind their reputation and image. The appearance is more important than integrity and authenticity. It's not about who you are, it's about how you look. If you look good, if you smell good, if you are well taken care and pretty, Well, that must mean that you have a lot of value. Well, you don't. You don't. That's the truth. So even when that image that they show you is completely false, because there's something else hiding behind it, yeah, people will value, they'll put a price tag on you of how much value you have, or completely devalue you, yeah, by the way you look, by the way you dress, your social status, your place in the hierarchy, your titles and your diplomas. Basically, it's a price tag that you hang on to create a reputation and an image, right? So the rule here is, the better you look on paper, the more value you hold. Again, you don't, because it's not the paper that gives you the value. A few more. Complaining is a weakness. I grew up personally with this exaggerated sense of stoicism in the family, but also in the culture. That's a cultural thing, right? You need to appear strong. Even when you're breaking from within, you need to appear strong. Again, it's about visibility. Not what you feel, not who you are, not what you can do. It's about how you look. It's about the optics. In such cultures, the optics are manipulated, right? So if you start speaking about your pain, if you start speaking about your truth, well, that must mean you're weak. It automatically means you are weak. I remember I grew up with many friends who went through depression and many other issues. I personally had a lot of anxiety. My parents were both doctors. Not once I had an advice from them to go to a psychologist and to go to talk about my mental health. First of all, 20 years ago, that was not even a thing in my country. If you went to a psychologist or a therapist or a psychiatrist, well, that meant you were cuckoo, you know, you were crazy. So it was a taboo. Mental health was a taboo. I don't know now. I can't speak about it now. That's why I'm making a difference between now, then, and I'm mentioning whenever I analyze something by saying back then, because I cannot put my finger upon a society or a culture as to what's happening now in terms and in comparison to what was happening 20 years ago. That would be a mistake. I don't know how is now in these cultures, because when I speak about collectivist cultures, I'm not only referring to my culture, right? There are many other collectivist cultures among the world, especially, for example, the Muslim countries. That's why I said I won't go into religion, but the Muslim countries are typical collectivist cultures too. Privacy is a strange word. Privacy, relationships and marriages are not personal. Here's the rule. When you marry in such a culture, you don't marry your husband. You marry his entire family. Yep. You marry the entire family. That means the family has automatically and undeniably access to everything that's happening in your marriage. Whether you decide to stay in a marriage or to divorce or to have children, the whole family has to know it. The whole family has to advise on it. The whole family has to decide upon it. And sometimes use the proximity that I said in the beginning, the proximity to you and to your husband, use it to manipulate the partners into separating or destroying a family. We have millions of cases like that. So no privacy. Whatever you do, you have, you think you are, everybody is going to know. Everybody's going to know. Last one. Opposing personal growth. I mentioned it in the common characteristics. Well, I can I can describe this with one sentence. Misery loves company. Yeah, misery loves company. That's the mentality in such cultures. You breaking free from the tradition and from the box that I put you in? How dare you? How dare you? Who do you think you are? Breaking free from this toxicity that I want to keep you in because I'm miserable for myself. I want you to stay in the same misery. I need company. I need you to keep me company. And the sad part about it is that in such cultures, they don't do it just to keep company. I said that as a joke, of course, but they do it because of the ill intent. In such cultures, there is a deeply rooted jealousy and envious behavior that stems from their inability to heal. Yeah. So in such cultures, when you try to break free from the status quo, from the conformity, from the comfort zone, when you choose for progress, because here's the thing, everybody loves you when you are just like them. Oh, they love you. They love you. You are the favorite cousin, you're the favorite niece, you are even the favorite child. But when you break free from the manipulation of one of the parents or both, or the family games, mind games, whatever, and toxicity is going there, they will start resenting you. They will exclude you from the family. They will hate on you. Yeah, because they see that as arrogance. They don't see it as an attempt for personal and individual growth. They are not happy to see you flourish, because when you flourish, you'll also be able to help them. No, they see that as an arrogance. They are offended by your growth. They are offended by the fact that you choose a different path than just the common path that everybody else chose. And the resentment behind it and the envy comes because they don't have the courage to make the same choices. Sometimes they can't. Some people cannot make the same choices as you. They just are in very different circumstances. Right? Sometimes there are many factors involved in it, but that's not your fault. That's not your fault for choosing yourself above the culture. But the people around you and in the culture will exclude you to punish you for choosing yourself. Now that is sickness of the heart, right there. Good, let's get into... So this is how we hide in the collectivist societies and how we manipulate these traits to get into toxicity. Yeah? Because by misusing them and by twisting their initial and original purpose into something that produces narcissism, yeah, we completely derail from the purpose of these cultures in the first place. We make them enabling cultures to bad things and not to good things. But this is the collectivist cultures. Let's get into the individualistic cultures where I live now, so I know them pretty well too. Let's, I already mentioned the general and the common characteristics, right? The focus here is on the individual, on the personal, not on the unity and on the community and not on the collective, right? Let's start with the individual is at the center, right? That was already said. But that goes further. The first rule here is all that matters is me. All that matters is me. So here we don't hide behind names, behind titles, behind reputation, behind image. We don't hide it. We don't hide it. We embrace the fact that the focus should be on me, even when that focus and everything I gain from that focus is at the expense of someone else. That's what makes it narcissistic. So, the focus is on me. Okay, that's good. That's good. That's how we grow. But whatever I gain for me is at the expense of using someone, abusing someone, manipulating someone, lying on someone, stealing from someone. That's when the whole meaning is twisted and becomes narcissistic. It becomes toxic. That's when a culture becomes an enabler of toxicity. You see how that works? So, prioritizing personal desires and gain over collective responsibility and common good. I don't care what happens to others. All I care is about me. If everything is fine in my life, I don't care. I don't care what happens outside my door. None of my business. That's none of my problem. So, at the core of such cultures is the belief that the individual is an end to itself. What do you mean, purpose? Purpose to do what? I'm the purpose. My life is the purpose. My well-being is the purpose. I am the whole purpose. You see the difference? Because when we are called in this life to do things, we are not called for ourselves. We are not called. A purpose does not mean your own foolishness and selfishness. We are not called to please our ego and pride. We are called for something bigger. That means we need to go beyond our own nonsense and serve to the community and serve to the bigger scale and bigger picture. But when you make it all about yourself and when you make the individual an end in itself, then everything else loses its purpose, doesn't it? Then whatever you call purpose is just interest, personal interest. Whatever you call calling is just your business, your personal branding, but it has nothing to do with calling. Because when you're called to serve others, not yourself. Nobody is called to serve themselves. There's no such thing as calling to serve me. Right? So, the personal is very important. And here's the trick. What we sell as individual or an individual empowerment, individual success, individual growth, it is in fact a glorification of the individual to the point of delusion. To the point of delusion, disgraceful again. Yeah? Because here's the problem. True empowerment promotes truth, deep connection, honest connection, unity, inclusion. Yeah? So, but when it's fake, it promotes division, superiority, polarization, entitlement, arrogance, selfishness. That's how you know when it's fake and when it's true. The second problem in this society, in these cultures, individualistic cultures, is the erosion of values and virtues. Individualistic cultures have a big problem with values and virtues because everything is based on the self-gain. Yeah, all we care is our own interest, and all types of relationships become fluid because now we can be whoever we want. If your delusion tells you that today you can be a woman and tomorrow you can be a horse, well, of course, you can be anything you want. Not only we believe that, we promote that. The level of delusion in all of this, whatever motivation, whatever empowerment speeches you see around is absolutely scary. You can be whoever you want, even when it's delusional. Even when you believe in your own nonsense, you can be that. Nobody is going to stop you. Because in our societies, we have dropped the resistance. Nowadays, you don't dare to tell somebody that they are doing something wrong, because you will meet their resistance immediately. Because some people are fed with so much delulu, they think when you remove their mask out of their face, they think you hate them. Yeah, they think you're doing it because you're jealous of their success. Sometimes you're not. Sometimes you're trying to tell people they're delusional and they need to dial it down. They need to get back to reality. Sometimes it's just that. But people, as I said, they take it personal all the time. Because people are caught into their cuckoo world and they think that everything is a personal attack. What do you mean I'm not a horse? I decide who I am. If I say I'm a horse, I'm a horse. And there's nobody who can tell me the other way around. Or otherwise. And that is rooted in this, the individual is an end in itself. So, we suffer from a lack of empathy, we suffer from respect, a lack of respect, desire for the well-being of others. Yeah. We have normalized lying, corruption. We use them as motivation. Oh yeah. Motivation to solution to conflict rather than peace and justice. Yeah. What else? Universal moral standards are rejected. Ethical decisions are reduced to personal likes and dislikes, or whatever we can get away with. Yeah. If I can get away with it, well, then that's acceptable. If it pleases my ego, well, then it's acceptable. I like it. I like it. Yeah. So in such societies, which is dangerous according to me, we believe that the measurement of anything else is the human himself, the individual himself, because there's a big difference. Yeah. Individual itself, which is based on ego and pride. Because if you say the human, well, that's good news, because the human is on another level. It's on a level of humanism, which is much healthier. Yeah, it's much healthier. It promotes more healthy values. But when you say individual, then, well, it's more selfish. So we set the standard, we decide what's acceptable, we decide what we want to be, we know what we want, and there's nobody that can tell us otherwise. Next element. Arrogance is mistaken for confidence. Oh, that's a big one. This is a big one. People in these individualistic societies are entitled to anything they wish because they are bold. They dare to ask. Here in the Netherlands, we have an expression that goes, big mouths owe half of the world. Yeah, because nobody gives you anything. You have to be brutal to take it. You have to snitch it from someone. That's how you get ahead. That's how you get ahead. It's competition, of course. I'm going to have to be bold about it, and I'm going to be aggressive about it. I'm going to be a real narcissist to get ahead. Because, well, what do you mean? The life is brutal. The world is aggressive. I have to be aggressive too. That is the mindset that we have in these countries. So, arrogance is now sold as competence and confidence. This is a great example in the leadership. Oh yeah. The confidence that these politicians lie to us every day, it has to be studied separately. It has to be studied. There is a level of talent and a level of boldness in that I will never understand. I'm not against being bold in life. Of course, sometimes you have to stand firmly for what you believe in, but it always has to be for a good purpose, as I said. Everything that I mentioned in this video, when it's used and twisted and disrupted into the negative, it will take a completely different meaning. It will produce something completely different. You cannot build confidence on arrogance. That's not what confidence is. Confidence is silent, it is not loud, right? So, there is a level of fake superiority too in these societies that doesn't come from a place of values, of virtues, or vision, but it comes from a place of deep insecurity, need for validation, and external glorification. Yeah, it is rooted in the insecurity of the person himself, in his inflated ego and pride. So, example, confidence says, this is what I can do, I have nothing to prove, and I seek nothing in return. Arrogance says, this is why I'm better than you, and I expect a validation and approval. Next element. Love is packaged as passion. This is also a big one because we have big issues with the superficiality and shallowness of what relationships, especially love relationships, have become nowadays. But this describes it pretty good, so I'm going to read it for you. The optics of courtship and companionship between a man and a woman have been distorted to the point where we have made anything toxic feel like a deep emotional attachment. We now chase toxicity, trauma bonding, and we mistake it for true love. We don't crave stability, character growth, and long-term relationships. We crave instant lust. We crave adrenaline and gratification and ego boost. And if we don't have any of these, we see the relationship as boring. What do you mean? It's boring. Every day the same? What are you talking about? That's not what a marriage should be. A marriage should be exciting all the time. Even though it's toxic. But it has to be, if it gives me the excitement that I need, yeah, then I love that person. And otherwise that person is boring. Yeah. So basically hormonal rush and lust are now more important than a deep emotional connection. Why? Because deep connection and serious commitments, they ask for serious work every day. I remember something interesting about my life again. When I got married, my husband's uncle, who is a very wise man, he came to us and he said it as a joke, but he meant it. Are you ready for this? For the marriage? And then he got very serious. He said, and we looked at him because we thought he was joking, but then he became serious. He became serious and he said, if I may give you a tip, as someone who has been married for many years, of course, because back then he was very old. A marriage is a daily investment and work. You two will have to work on your marriage every single day. And if you are not ready for that kind of a commitment, then you are in a marriage for the wrong reasons. I hope this might be a good advice for someone who's watching. If it speaks to you, then it's for you. So, deep connections, serious commitments ask for serious work every day. And they ask for us to take responsibility. So that's a lot of work, right? Who wants the work? Why would I invest that much? I don't think so. I'm just going to have fun. Yeah. And in comparison with a shallow, quick, and meaningless experience, we're going to always choose the meaningless experience. Yeah. It's easier. It's the easy choice. That's the thing. Okay, next one. Transactional human interaction. This is also big. What happens here? When relationships or interactions, any kind, it could be business, it could be a job, a career, or whatever, when it becomes an interaction, a transaction, sorry. When relationships become transactional, they shift from unconditional support to a give and take system of unspoken scores, focusing on benefits like favors, status, resources, which leads to other problems, yeah, resentment, anger, anxiety, whatever, superficiality. So everything in these societies has become transactional. If it doesn't mean anything for me, then I'm out of it. What do you mean? No, I have to benefit something out of it. Whatever relationship, whatever interaction I have with someone, it has to benefit me first, which is rooted again in this cult of the individual, right? And as I said, it's based on performance and not values. It's based on performance and not values. Self-gain, performance, manipulation, fakery, put a mask on and pretend to be every day a different person just so you can get yours. Which is shameful, and it's a shame, right? Hustling is the main game plan. We live in hustle societies. Individualistic societies are hustle societies. What does that mean? Hustle societies refer to modern cultures glorifying Constant work, ambition, and productivity, often equating busyness with self-worth. Being busy all the time, it means you are worthy a lot. Well, it doesn't, because you can be busy doing nonsense all day long and you still mean nothing because you're not contributing to anything, or you're not producing anything valuable. You're producing to yourself, you're producing to your own ego and pride and selfishness there, but you're not producing to the common good. You're not producing anything for anybody else, even if it's your family, right? Persistence, long hours, sacrificing self-care and for success are seen as badges of honor. What do you mean my health is priority? No, it's not. Making money, that's the priority. Status in society, that's the priority. Being perceived as successful, that's the priority. Even if my health goes to trash, I don't care. Everybody's sick, so who cares? So those are seen, this kind of sacrifice, which is delusional to me, it's complete nonsense, is seen as a badge of honor. Good for you. Good for you. Even if that leads to burnout, stress, negative health impacts, basically the work-life balance does not exist. Work-life balance does not exist. And here's a side note about me living in the Netherlands. One of the best things that I'm experiencing right now in the Netherlands, and one of the things that I admire this country for, is the fact that Dutch people do not compromise the self-care time. Dutch people are choosing more and more every day to work part-time jobs because of their well-being. Unlike other countries, United States is completely different, UK is completely different, very competitive, very working in the United States. People are working 2-3 jobs just to maintain the family. And no, it's not always connected directly to the fact that the lifestyle is expensive or to the personal ambition. That's always a choice. So I really admire the level of awakening here in the Netherlands from people to choose more and more for themselves. Not for their careers, not for their jobs, but for themselves first and foremost, because they realize that the level of stress in the world right now is skyrocketing. The level of abuse at the workplace, the level of condescending, and the level of disrespect, and the level of stress and pressure that they experience in a full-time job is really not worthy in the end of the day, right? Because if that job leads you to stress and sickness, then everything loses its purpose, right? No matter how much you love that job, it's not worth it. So, but in the highly competitive societies and the individualistic cultures, in general, the how is it called? The work-life balance almost does not exist. And the motto in these societies is, so hustle cultures, they equate busyness with productivity, exhaustion with accomplishment, and most dangerously, self-worth with professional success. Our working is glamorized and stretched to the point where people truly believe that hard work is the secret to getting ahead, which is an illusion. The moments of joy, opportunities for growth, and the simple pleasures of life become overshadowed by an undying to-do list. Exhaustion and constant striving are viewed not as a problem. And the motto in these cultures is, we don't just survive, we thrive. Yeah. Next problem. The attention-seeking disorder. In such cultures, modesty is not a virtue. Oh no. Because when you are capable of something, the entire world needs to see it. What do you mean you are competent and you are worthy of something? You have to flaunt it around. Because if you don't shout about it, nobody sees you. And if nobody sees you, that means you don't exist. Wrong. Wrong, ding dong. because you are who you are and you do what you do, not for others to see it. You do what you do because you care about something and because of your essence, because of who you are, not to flaunt it around. That's the difference. So if you don't shout about your success, you're not seen. And if you're not seen, it means you don't exist. Bragging and flaunting achievements is a race where everyone keeps comparing and competing with others, not for the sake of the achievement. That's the twisted part. But for the adrenaline rush we get by being validated and glorified from others. You see how that went into the wrong direction immediately? There's nothing wrong to say, I'm good, I'm successful, I'm pretty, I'm nice, I'm loyal. There's nothing wrong with that. You don't have to shout it, but it's good to say it, yeah, to yourself. But it gets twisted when you do it for the wrong reason. You should do it because it makes you feel good. You should do it because that's who you are. And you are the same person every day. But when you do it for validation and glorification from others, then it takes another meaning. Because then you're not doing it for the purpose of doing it. You're doing it for what you get out of it, for your own selfishness, to glorify your ego. Social media has become a machine for likes and followers, and the more you have, the better. The rewards are visibility, and acceptance. The louder you are, the more important it must mean you are. Performance is a talent. This is also connected to this attention seeking that we are suffering from in these cultures. Performance is a talent. Hold on, I'm almost there. So what happens here with the performance? Because we live in very superficial cultures and societies, we find appearances and perception of others more important than reality and truth. This is very similar to what I said for the collectivist cultures. So, for example, many self-made millionaires, now side note here, not everybody who has built success and who has achievements in life is doing it based on performance and fakery and foolery and by using others and by abusing others. That is not it. Not everybody who's successful is a narcissist. Not everybody who has made it into politics is a narcissist, has narcissistic traits. That's not what I'm saying, and it's important to say this right here because I might give the impression that I'm putting everybody in the same group here, which is not true. But some people, some self-made millionaires, entrepreneurs, business owners, they don't offer depth. They master the optics. So what happens here? They use charisma, buzzwords, and personal branding to create a persona. Not per se who they are, but to create a persona that attracts devotion to the point of self-grandiosity. But if you scratch beneath the surface, you'll see abuse of power, exploitation, emotional instability. You'll see deception, money laundering, connections with the dark world, corruption, and many other things. Last one, everything is a traumatic experience. This is the total opposite as what I said in the collectivist cultures. If there we weren't even allowed to express our feelings and to cry for the pain that we felt as children, here is the total opposite. Here the new generation are going no contact with the parents, with the whole family. They're deleting every parent from their social media, from their life. They're moving into a different country or city to get away from their parents who abused them. Actually, they were just being disciplined. Sometimes it's just discipline. But in the individualistic cultures where everything is about me and the world revolves around me because I'm the most important thing, yeah, here we experience everything as traumatic. Oh, so your parents shouted at you? You have to go to therapy. You have to go to therapy for everything, actually. I remember when my parents passed a few years ago, the very first advice that I got from everybody was, you need to go to therapy. You need to find a trauma therapist. You need to find a grieving therapist, a therapist that deals with the way you grieve your parents, the loss of your parents. Because what do you mean you will do it on your own? Because my response was, what? Why would I need a therapist for that? The grieving process is a personal process. I need to go through it on my own, myself. Nobody will ever teach me how to grieve my parents, because nobody has lived my life. No therapist in the world will ever understand what I've been through, no matter how much I explain it. But you see, the perception of the society and the culture in these individualistic cultures is that you always need to process difficulties through therapy or help or a professional. So basically, discipline is now called abuse, and the slightest disagreement between the parent and the child can cause a big gap or a breach between them, because children have become entitled, right? So these are, what I read, characteristics and detailed personality traits, if you would call that way, of societies that are enabling toxicity and narcissism among our societies. Let's see what other points do I have here, because otherwise the video becomes too long. I do have some more points. How can I, let's wrap it up, this so far, what I said until now. So in both of these cultures, the goal is the same. Yeah, promoting toxicity, producing the same things. But the game is played differently. One of them produces the vulnerable narc, as I said, and the other one produces the grandiose narc. And how do we go from here is the question, right? Like, okay, we know now what the problem is. How do we tackle this? At this point, we need to take action, because what we promote today becomes our future tomorrow. One of the biggest mistakes of us humans, of people, individuals, countries, whatever we call us, societies, is that we get to be nonchalant about what we are building, but we are entitled to good things in the future. Well, unfortunately, that's not how life works. That would be great, because you don't take responsibility about anything, and you just produce mess and toxicity and whatever you do, foolery and fakery and lies and manipulation and mind games, and then you flourish and you become this great individual, or you become this great nation or this great society. Unfortunately, that's not how it works. Because you live what you produce. You might not live the exact same toxicity that you produce. Somebody else will live it, but you will live his toxicity. So as you see, what goes around comes back around. That is why it's so important to put attention and to pay attention and to take action onto what we are producing. What we are producing as individuals, what we are producing every day as cultures, what we are producing as societies on all levels. But it starts with us as individuals, right? It starts on the basics, on the down. It doesn't start up. It starts here on the bottom, where we are as mothers, as parents, as best friends, as lovers, as partners, as housewives, as career takers, as entrepreneurs, as housewives. It starts with the basics. And from that basics, we produce something. We are constantly producing something. Whether we see it or not, whether we like it or not, we are producing all the time. And this topic makes us reflect upon what we are producing and how can we reverse, how can we turn around, take a U-turn if it's possible. For some things it's no more possible because we have already, marked our fate sometimes for generations, and it will take generations to reverse the course of history and to change things again. But that's okay. The things that we can change now, we should change now. We should change now. And the things that we cannot change now, we need to study them thoroughly and to leave the maturity, to leave the information, to leave the knowledge, to leave the wisdom to the next generation so that they can take off where we left. That's the purpose. So, what are the choices that we have then? We have only two choices. After we detect these kind of cultures, after we detect what's promoted here and how damaging it is to our societies and to our lives and to our future, our job is to make one choice out of two. Only two choices. One choice is to obey and conform to these systems or to these societies or to these cultures in this case, or to rebel against it and take action. To break free out of that. To break free out of that. It's a system, it's a conditioning, it's a mindset, it's a behavior, it's a generational trauma, it's a family unspoken rule, whatever that is, violence, whatever that is. So, this is related to choices. Choices. A toxic culture, or an enabling culture in this case, will ask you to make a difficult choice. It will force you to make a choice between cultural loyalty and personal truth. Cultural loyalty and personal truth. If we choose for the loyalty, to stay loyal to the culture, even though we know it's disruptive, even though we know it's toxic, even though we know it's hurting us, if we choose to stay loyal to such culture, then we have to settle for conditional human decency, respect, and love. Conditional, because we don't decide anymore what we get. The culture decides. The culture decides what you get. Whether the love that you get is toxic, whether that relationship is pure, whether the family games there or not are happening, the culture will decide that. Because as I said, the culture, by promoting the toxicity, the culture is enabling narcissism. And when the narcissist tells you to shut up, the culture will protect him. The culture will protect him. Because the culture produced him in the first place. That's the thing. So, if we choose to break free, on the other hand, we pay the price of being excluded, isolated, and even discarded and punished by the culture itself. So, as you can see, both of these choices will take you will cost you something. Both of these choices have a price. Your duty and mine is to decide which price we want to pay. That's the only thing we can do. We're going to pay a price for either of these choices. Whether you choose to stay and be obedient to your culture or get out of there, you will pay the price, make no mistake about that. But you got to choose which one of these are you willing to pay for. Which price can you afford to pay? I chose the second one. I rebelled and I left. I left. I broke free. And yes, was I excluded? Was I ashamed? Was I blamed? Was I seen as the black sheep in the family? Of course I was. I still am seen that way. But it doesn't matter. This is not about the culture. This is not about the family. This is about me, my life. I got one life. And I got one chance to live it properly. I got one life and I got one chance to live it the way I want and the way I'm supposed to live it. These two are not separate from each other. And that cost me abandoning of a culture that was toxic, that added nothing to me. It only took from me, but it didn't add anything to me. So, second element here, to understand how the game should be played, right? Once we have a good sight and a good scan of these kind of cultures. Is suppressing the truth. You see, toxic cultures and enabling cultures have a big problem with the truth. I think every culture has problems with the truth, but especially cultures who promote toxicity and drama and victimhood and keeping people in this victim mentality, they have a problem with truth. Why? Because truth exposes everything. Truth exposes every nonsense that's happening in the culture. So a toxic culture is not interested in truth. It suppresses it, it hides it, because truth does not benefit its product. Yeah. So by hiding it, it makes us believe that the lies that the culture sells us must be true, right? So we are expected to be silent for maintaining the peace. We are expected to be obedient. We are expected to be conforming into such cultures. But that is not necessarily connected to the truth. Sometimes all of that is connected to manipulation and lies. Sometimes you are asked to do all of that to stay suppressed under the games that these cultures are playing for you and in your face, but not necessarily because there's truth in what they do and what they say you should do. Yeah? That's the problem with the truth. Here's another important element that we need to realize, because there is another component here that I've experienced in my life when I broke free from my culture. Well, broke free is a big word, right? But you know what I mean, when I removed myself from that culture. Because nobody was keeping me hostage, right? That was a choice that I made. But the system is very important, because when you refuse to continue living in such cultures and you choose to leave for yourself, you also feel shame and guilt. Because it's in human nature to always doubt ourselves. What if I did something wrong? What if I lost everything? Because that was part of my identity, right? My culture. That's my entire life. I left my entire life behind. It feels like you're shedding this skin, and it feels like loss of identity, which it isn't. Actually, you are shedding the toxicity away. By adjusting to a more healthy culture, or to a more healthy mentality or mindset and routine and self-worth, and you start changing and improving, yeah. But that deeply rooted shame and guilt about what you left, that maybe you made a mistake, it will always follow you for a long time until you make peace with it. But breaking free from our toxic cultures, or removing ourselves, or leaving or abandoning such cultures, it does not mean abandoning everything we are. It does not mean abandoning our identity. It does not mean hating these cultures. Yeah. But it means that we are choosing for our own sanity. It means we are choosing for our own truth above the conditioning of the culture. It means we are choosing for our freedom and liberation. It's an internal liberation that you experience, right? Because believe it or not, toxic cultures keep you hostage. Toxic cultures keep you small. Toxic cultures keep you undeveloped. No matter how great of visions and ideas you might have, they don't flourish in toxic cultures. They don't grow for many reasons. But when you choose to continue to support this kind of toxic cultures because you can't break free, you don't dare, you are chained to family, whatever the reasons might be, which are sometimes very justified, right? Sometimes it's not enough to want to leave, sometimes you can't leave, right? You are attached to that culture through parents, through kids, through careers, through whatever. So choosing to continue to support such cultures means tolerating the manipulation and emotional abuse that's happening, and it's hiding behind it. And so our duty is to detect and to address the problems that these cultures produce, right? And to dismantle the systems that support them. A culture is not just a matter of customary laws and silent rules in your family. A culture builds an entire system. It builds an entire system. And sometimes these whole systems need to be dismantled and shattered and broken down to basic in order to start building anew from a more healthy set of values, from a healthy set of virtues, in order to build upon truth. If the cultures we come from or we live in right now are toxic and are enablers and promoters of toxic traits and everything that's damaging to a human mind and human soul and individual and citizen and whatever you call it, then these systems need to be dismantled. We need to detect and understand what needs to leave, because everything that's built on lies never produces truth. It will never produce truth. You can twist it, turn it, manipulate it, and sell it for whatever you want. You can change the name. You can force your citizens to accept something, but you cannot change the product. You cannot change the result that comes out of something when it's toxic. Toxicity will produce toxicity. Pain will produce pain. Hate will produce hate. That's why we need to dismantle some systems in our cultural backgrounds, in order to understand what happened, in order to understand how we can grow and how we can build healthy, to start building on truth, how it really should be built, how it really should be built, not pretending. One of the biggest problems I have with the world right now is we are all pretending. It's pretense, it's fakery, it's fake. We need to burn it down to the ground, everything that's fake. It has to go. There is no way to build anything authentic if you're playing games, if you have manipulation and whatever fakery and foolery you're doing. It will never happen. That's why the world is in the mess that it is. Another point here. Healing ourselves. We need to separate. This is also a big one, because it deals with that guilt that I talked about. How do we remove that shame and guilt within us? We need to understand something crucial here. Separate personal healing from the collective wounding. Sometimes your wounding and sometimes the toxicity that you live in is not because of you. It's because of whatever traumatic past, whatever issues, whatever nonsense, whatever lack of courage your parents and your grandparents had to break free from their chains that left you trapped in the same chains. But you need to understand that when it comes to personal healing, you have a choice. And you should always choose for that. You are not obliged to your culture. If the culture gives you only pain, you owe nothing to that culture. So you need to distinguish personal healing from collective wounding. They are both. We are all responsible for doing as much as we can to produce better cultures. Right? But choosing for personal healing should not be a guilt trip. If you choose for personal healing, stick to it. Yeah? Because in the end, you have to choose between, when you have to choose between cultural conditioning that produce only more conditions and more toxicity, and between your own liberation and sense of inner freedom, then you need to break the cycle. Yeah? This is not even about you leaving the country. This is you breaking free from everything that was connected to your mindset, behaviors, toxic traits, traumas, family, history, everything. You shed the skin and you move on. Break free, liberate yourself. Liberate yourself. I had a very interesting conversation a few months ago with someone from my culture, where I come from. And she has a daughter who studies here in the Netherlands, and she said, we were speaking about mentality and about issues, cultural issues, and at some point I said something like, you should tell. I think she was asking for tips for her daughter, right? Because she's young and she's a student, and I know the system, so she wanted some tips. And I said, tell your daughter when she goes to a job interview or introduces herself to a professor or someone, free yourself, liberate yourself. Don't stay in this little box that your culture put you in. Liberate yourself, be you. It's okay, be you, be who you are. Here in the Netherlands, we appreciate that. We want to see the real you, not the pretense you, not who you think you are, not putting a facade on. We want to see the real you, your core, because that's who you really are, and that's what's appreciated. And she said, wow, what you said is so interesting, because one of her professors told her the same things. You people coming from that culture are so contracted, are so, always very, I don't know what's called. It's not modesty. It's not modesty. I think it's complexion. It's complexity. We grow up with this. Be small. Stay small. Be modest. Now, don't push it to the extreme, as I said. In the individualistic cultures, it becomes arrogance, right? So that's a trick to maintain the balance between who you truly are, but also to be able to understand that it's okay to be seen for who you are, for values that you are, for what you represent at your core, right? To be able to mirror and to reflect that into the world. People like that. People appreciate that. Because here's the trick with the Western countries where I live. In the Western cultures, they get a little bit suspicious when you are like that. Because they know that's not the real you. They can see it. So they get suspicious and they get scared sometimes. What are you hiding? Why can't you be yourself, right? Because they don't understand that it's a cultural conditioning. They don't understand that it might be a result of a cultural trauma or something that you have been through in your family. And so you were trained to be small. You were trained to not talk. You were trained to sit in the corner. And they see that as not only as insecurity, but as suspicious, right? So always choose to break the cycle. Always choose to break the cycle. Last tip here, the void. Narcissism is not born and does not grow in a void. Narcissism is not an individual problem. Toxicity in our cultures is not an individual problem. Although that's what we have made it, we have made narcissism a personal issue. We have made narcissism a family problem. Yes, you were not raised properly. You have toxicity in you had toxicity in your parents' life, and you had narcissistic parents, and that's why you became narcissistic. It's not an individual problem. Narcissism is a cultural problem, and it's a society problem. Yeah. Because narcissism does not grow in void. Narcissism needs the right habitat to grow. Every toxic behavior, or good behavior for that matter, it needs habitat to grow. It needs the environment. The environment, what is the environment? The society, the culture, the community, the family, the individual itself too. Let's not remove the personal responsibility, that's very important. Yeah, the conditioning, the mentality, the values and virtues, everything. It's all a habitat. It's a big habitat. And in this habitat, you will either grow something good or something bad, or both. But if the narcissism prevails, then there's your answer right there. Then you have grown only toxicity. You have grown drama, you have grown manipulation and deceit and foolery and fakery in the society. Because that's what prevails. Whatever prevails, it shows you where you have invested the most, right? So, my point here is, let's stop treating narcissism or culture as the only enabler of narcissism, right? Culture is not the only enabler of narcissism. Because as I said, narcissism needs to grow. It has to be fed through many channels, right? And culture is just one of them. Let me go quickly, because it will become 2 hours video, which is pretty neat for me because I tend to speak endlessly. And I apologize for that. But you know, some topics need to be treated so thoroughly that you can't just brush over in 1 hour and bring examples, bring definitions, bring the meaning, explain everything, put structure in it. It's a lot of work, so that's why my videos take a lot of time, but I think they are also very well treated, and they give you a good perspective as to what I'm talking about, and not just a, fast definition about a topic. What do we do from here is the question, right? Because yes, we need to take actions. What are the actions that we need to take to break from this cultural, or to start producing something better in our culture, right? Because it's one thing to break free from toxicity and from whatever the culture is promoting, but it's another thing to replace it with a good thing, right? Like, nobody teaches you that. How do you do that? My coffee is cold, but I'm going to drink anyway. Okay, I'm going to read them because there are quite a few, very fast, and you can note whichever speaks to you to understand what probably you are doing wrong in your culture. Stages of actions that we need to take for ourselves and within our cultures. 1. We need to identify and start calling things for what they are, exactly as they are. Don't pretend to unsee something you have already seen. Don't gaslight yourself and let others do the same thing to you and lie then. And when you draw the line, don't feel guilty and don't apologize. When you draw the line to choose for yourself. 2. We need to replace blind loyalty with integrity. Because these cultures will force you to have loyalty blindly, right? You just have to trust what I say and what I sell to you. That's what they say. But you have to choose for integrity, doing the right thing, not what they tell you to do. Loyalty to our cultures does not mean we need to stay silent when they are abusive, when they suppress our individual growth and opinion and speaking truth. When a culture does that, by naming it loyalty or blind obedience or tradition, then the purpose is not growth. The purpose is silence. 3. We need to stop wear suffering as a badge of honor. Nothing to be proud in suffering. Having a painful life and staying suppressed because the society rewards it or it sees it as a, sacrifice or hero act. It's nothing noble or exceptional. It's not strength and it is not a reward for being a good man or a woman. It is only forced obedience dressed up as a choice. Forced obedience dressed up as a choice that you don't have clearly. 4. We need to stop tolerating evil as a moral obligation. We don't owe forgiveness to anybody that hurt us. Forgiveness, just like love and respect, need to be earned. In some cultures, elderly people or parents or whoever, they don't know what an apology means. Because in order to give an apology, you need to take accountability for your nonsense. And some people hate to be wrong. Yeah. Next, we need to stop rewarding dysfunction for a little bit of love. In narcissistic societies or enabling cultures, we are often conditioned to stay in abuse, stay small, stay silent, because we think the other person loves us, even though that's toxic or abusive. We are breadcrumbed and gaslighted to believe that. I mentioned this before as well. Next one, 6. We need to stop feeling guilty for standing up to our bullies. Now, this is my favorite. Including our families. Bullies need to be punched in the face. There is no compromises with bullies. Blood does not give you a free pass to anything. No. Everyone needs to earn their position in our lives. And the same goes for us. There is no such thing as blind sacrifice, blind loyalty, blind unconditional love. You have to earn it. All of it. We need to stop chasing for approval from people who broke us. We can't heal in the same environment that make us sick, including cultures. Even if that environment seems to have improved or thrives off of some toxic soil, that society or culture will still become toxic. It's just a matter of time. Basically what they grew, the soil, that's important. We need to start promoting values and healing, even if we stand alone. Why? Because that's the key to building environments, societies, healthy environments and societies, families, relationships. Yeah, and we also, that's not enough. We need to exclude everybody who doesn't fit in this profile. Whoever toxic person, family member, whoever they pretend to be in your life, that's the answer to them. Yeah, that's what you should do. No toxicity in your life. Leave behind anyone who doesn't fit your standards. Abandon them. They're no good. So that you can have the opportunity to build anew. You cannot build anew something healthy if you don't get rid of the junk underneath, right? Because that junk will keep feeding. You might build in here on the surface nice things, beautiful things, but if the soil is still dirty, you won't build roses out of it. You will build, trenches and bushes, but not roses. That's the point. We need to start addressing our issues loudly. Stop being modest about toxicity and about pain and about, oh, I'm so ashamed, and oh, it's not nice to go in public and to talk about who hurt me. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Let me tell you something about narcissistic abuse. Narcissists need to be publicly shamed. Publicly shamed. Not privately. They deserve it too. So, start addressing your issues loudly, not silently. Even when there is no audience, speak truth. Stand in your truth, even when others try to punish you for speaking it. Yeah? Because there's no other way to breaking the cycles you're in but to speak the truth. That's where it starts, with speaking the truth. You don't owe your narcissistic culture or society anything. You owe yourself healing, though. Next, we need to redefine the metrics of success. Crucial. This is crucial because the damage that we are creating in our countries and societies and cultures by giving them this false image of what success truly is, we are destroying people. And we are taking this very lightly because nobody cares, right? But trust me when I say a lot of people are destroying their families, they are destroying their sense of identity, they are throwing away every measurement of morality and integrity and authenticity they know for themselves. They even stop being loyal to themselves and everyone around them. They even go as far as hurting others in the name of success. Because what do you mean? I need success in my life. No, you don't. You need decency. That's what you need. And if that decency produces success, good for you. Yeah? We need to redefine the metrics of success in a culture that tells you to chase validation, self-gain, image. Choose authenticity. That's it. That's the only way to be successful. No, not everybody will put you on a cover of a magazine by that kind of success. No, not everybody will see it. It's not about that. Success is not flaunting around what you have. Success is not flaunting around what you achieved. Success is how you live, right here. Right here. That's it. That's it. That's all. That's the success of your life. You don't need to be on a cover of a magazine. You don't need to have 10 books to tell people that you are successful. That will never fulfill you. Trust me on this. It will never fulfill you. So, in a world that glorifies self-promotion, expose falsity, in economies that reward ruthless ambition, we need to learn to live in integrity. Do not participate in collective fakery. Do not promote fake models. Do not support foolishness. We need to stop participating in things, events, promotions because it benefits us and start doing it because it's the right thing to do. That's it. That's all. Why? Because everything that's good and that's meant for good is rooted in values, in healing, and not in selfishness and arrogance. Because when you throw away your core identity to join falsity, foolery, and whatever games you play for the purpose of having that 5 minutes of fame, you might lose everything else that's dear to you. Yeah? That was my detailed analysis and topic about cultural conditioning and impact of enabling cultures and how cultures enable toxicity and narcissism, but also how they keep it ongoing. I hope I have shed some light upon this topic. I hope I have opened up a gate and a room for expression here where we can get deeper into the issues among our societies, where we can start understanding that unless we start making different choices, we will never ever be able to change our societies for the better. The key is always the personal journey. The key is always us, ourselves. It always starts with us. It always starts by asking ourselves questions about what we've been through, where we come from. No, ignoring your toxicity in your culture, ignoring your cultural traits and everything that you grew up in. No, it does not mean throwing away all your culture. It does not mean being arrogant about where you come from. It does also not mean being proud for what you've been through. It has nothing to do with pride. It has to do with acceptance of who you are, with all the flaws that you have taken with you, with all the pain that you have taken from your culture, to transform it and to use it into growth, not bitterness, not shame. Trust me, many of us have had, including myself, especially myself as since I'm speaking about myself in this video, we have had thousands of reasons to stay bitter in our life. Oh, if I tell you about my life, I will speak about my life a lot, but not now. If I tell you about my life, you would completely justify if I was the most bitter woman you would have ever known in your life. We all have reasons to stay bitter. We have all reasons to stay small, to stay angry at everybody else because of the fate we have been through, because of what happened to us, because of the families we grow in, because of the toxicity of the culture. But all of that pain, whatever we've been through, it's not a reason to stay in that place. You would be surprised to know how many people never achieve the potential they are called to achieve because of what they have been through, because they are so stuck in that image, because they are so stuck in that area of their life where they were hurt and broken down. But that is never an excuse to stay there. It's not an excuse to stay there. So get the fluff up, get your shit together, and move on from whatever pain, whatever hurt, whatever brokenness, whatever shame, whatever guilt other people put on you, the culture, the family, the parents, the siblings, the colleagues, the partners, the lovers, the husbands and wives and children. You have to break free from the cycle. And the only way to break free is to heal. And the only way to heal is to make a choice between the toxic traits and the cultural conditioning and your own freedom and truth. So ask yourself, what is your truth and what do you want to do with it? Have a good day, everybody. I wish you a great day, and stay tuned for more videos. In the next video, spoiler alert, I am still deciding on this, but I think I would like to speak about migration as a problem in the European Union in general, but also from my personal life and what I learned about it and from it. Bye everyone. Bye.